The night everything changed, I still remember that night, the quiet hum of the ceiling fan, the ticking of the wall clock, and the strange heaviness in my chest that wouldn't let me sleep. It was 2:17 a.m. when I finally gave up trying. My husband, Daniel, was fast asleep beside me, his phone face down on the nightstand, glowing faintly every few minutes with notifications. Normally, I wouldn't have cared, but that night, something in me felt different. You know that feeling when your heart starts whispering things your mind refuses.
The sun was pouring through my window, golden and calm, like nothing bad could possibly happen. I remember thinking, today's going to be good. If only I had known. At that time, I was surrounded by people I thought loved me. My best friend Maya, my partner Daniel, and the small circle that had been part of my life for years. We laughed together, worked together, celebrated each other's wins. Or so I believed. When I looked at them, I didn't see betrayal. I saw comfort. Familiar faces. Safe ground. But behind those smiles, they were already building the cracks that would later pull me under. You know how sometimes you feel something's off? That faint shift in energy you can't explain? That week, I felt it. Maya stopped returning my calls as often. Daniel became distant, his texts shorter, his excuses longer. I told myself it was just stress, or maybe I was overthinking. Because why would the people I love most suddenly change? That's what betrayal does best. It starts quietly. It hides in the small moments when you choose to trust instead of question. I remember one evening. We were all out celebrating Maya's promotion. Everyone was laughing, cheering, raising glasses. But there was a moment when I looked up from my drink and caught Daniel whispering something in her ear. They laughed, a soft, private kind of laugh. The kind that doesn't belong in friendship. My stomach twisted, but I smiled anyway. Because who wants to believe that darkness can hide behind familiar faces? You're imagining things, I told myself. They would never do that to you. That lie, the one I told myself to feel safe, became the foundation of everything that would collapse later. Weeks passed, and the distance grew. Suddenly, plans were made without me. Conversations stopped when I walked into the room. Maya was suddenly too busy. Daniel was working late. And the strange thing is, everyone around me knew something I didn't. They looked at me with pity, like they were watching a story unfold, one they already knew the ending to. That's the cruel part about betrayal. It's never just one person. It's a performance. Everyone plays a part. I still remember the night everything snapped. I was at home, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the growing emptiness. Then a message popped up from a mutual friend, a photo from a party I didn't even know happened. There they were, Daniel and Maya, standing close. Too close. His hand on her waist. Her eyes glowing in a way that told a story words never could. For a second, the world went quiet. Everything I thought I knew, every conversation, every shared secret, every I love you, blurred together until nothing made sense. Betrayal doesn't just break your heart. It rearranges the way you see people. It teaches you that sometimes the monsters don't hide in the dark. They smile at you in daylight. I wanted to scream, cry, confront them. But something inside me froze. It wasn't anger yet. It was disbelief. That's when I realized they hadn't just lied to me. They'd laughed at me. Every kind word, every apology, every "you're overthinking it," all part of their little play. And still, I said nothing. Not that night. Because deep down, a new feeling was taking root. Something colder, sharper. Not the kind that breaks. The kind that rebuilds. Over the next few days, I watched them carefully. Every excuse, every hidden glance. I let them think I was blind. Because the thing about being underestimated is, it gives you time to plan. They thought I was weak. They thought my silence meant surrender. They were wrong. What they didn't know was that I'd started gathering pieces, messages, receipts, photos, fragments of truth they thought they'd buried. I wasn't looking for revenge yet. Not then. I was looking for clarity. Because before you fight back, you have to know exactly what you're fighting. I remember sitting alone one night, the city lights flickering outside my window, and whispering to myself, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." I could feel something inside me shifting. That part of me that used to forgive too easily, that used to put others first no matter the cost. That version of me was gone. Pain changes people. But betrayal? It rebuilds them into something unstoppable. From that night on, I decided to stop reacting and start observing. I smiled when I saw them together. I laughed at their jokes. I let them believe I was still the naive, trusting friend who couldn't see what was right in front of her. And the more they believed it, the bolder they became. They started slipping, little things here and there. Forgotten lies, careless glances, secret meetings that weren't as secret as they thought. Every mistake they made gave me another piece of the puzzle. One night, as I stood by the window watching the rain fall, I thought to myself, they built this storm, but I'm going to decide how it ends. That was the night I started my quiet revenge. Not out of hate, but out of justice. Because there's a certain kind of peace in letting karma borrow your hands. They thought I was weak. They thought they could take everything from me and walk away untouched. But what they didn't realize was that I had already begun writing the ending to their story. Sometimes falling isn't failure. It's the sound of your old self breaking, so the stronger one can rise. The life I thought was perfect. They say the calm before the storm feels like peace. For me, that peace looked a lot like happiness. Back then, my world seemed solid. Steady routines, familiar faces, and a rhythm that felt safe. I had a small apartment filled with sunlight, a job that kept me busy, and people who made every ordinary moment feel special. Maya was the first to walk into my life. She had that effortless charm, the kind that turned heads and made you feel lucky just to be around her. We met at work, two assistants trying to survive under the same impossible boss. She could make chaos sound like comedy. Soon, we were inseparable. Coffee breaks, late-night phone calls, sharing secrets we swore would never leave the room. Then came Daniel. He wasn't perfect, but he was warm. He had that quiet confidence that makes you believe you're safe. We met at a friend's dinner party. He laughed at all the right moments, remembered every small thing I said, and had this way of looking at me that made me forget the rest of the room. At least in the beginning. If life were a photograph, that year would have been the brightest one on my wall. Maya and Daniel even got along. Too well, some people joked. But I never worried. I thought loyalty was something we all shared. We'd go out together, the three of us. I'd sit there, smiling, watching the two people I loved most teasing each other like siblings. If someone had told me then that they'd one day become the reason I'd question everything, I would have laughed. Every morning, Daniel would text, "You're my reason to get through the day." Every night, Maya would call to vent about her problems, and I'd listen, feeling needed, trusted. I thought we were building something strong, friendship, love, stability. But what I didn't know was that underneath it all, something else was quietly taking shape. The first crack appeared so small I almost missed it. Daniel began canceling plans. Deadlines, he'd say. Maya started arriving late to our hangouts, always with a vague story about errands or helping a friend. I noticed, but I didn't want to see it. Denial is comfortable. It lets you stay inside the illusion a little longer. Sometimes late at night, I'd look at the two of them laughing across the table and feel something shift inside me. It wasn't jealousy. It was distance, like I was suddenly watching them from the outside. Still, I brushed it off. Because when you love people, you build excuses for their absence. Looking back, I realize I was building a house on sand. At work, Maya and I shared everything. Notes, tasks, even snacks. But one morning, our manager called me in to ask about a project I'd been leading. Apparently, an error had been found, and somehow my name was attached. I was confused. I opened my files, double-checked everything, and found a document, edited. The timestamp showed it wasn't me. Someone had changed a line that made the report fail. When I asked Maya about it, she smiled, a calm, careful smile. "Oh, maybe you just forgot to save the right version." Her tone was friendly, but something about her eyes felt cold. I didn't push it. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, but deep down, a whisper started forming. What if it wasn't? Around that same time, Daniel started getting mystery calls. He'd step out of the room, whispering in that low voice people use when they don't want to be heard. When I asked, he said it was work. I believed him, because trusting the wrong person is easier than facing the truth. Still, the universe has a way of leaving breadcrumbs. One night, his phone buzzed while he was in the shower. A message flashed on the screen. Last night was risky but worth it. No name, just a heart emoji. My stomach turned cold. Before I could process, the water stopped. I locked the screen, placed the phone back exactly as it was, and pretended nothing happened. I smiled through dinner, laughed at his jokes, and told myself I needed more proof. Because when your heart's on the line, even truth feels like a threat. Days became weeks. The distance between the three of us widened. My home, once filled with laughter, started echoing with silence. And every silence carried a question I didn't want to answer. Maya still called me, still asked for advice, still acted like nothing was wrong. But I started noticing small slips, details that didn't match, shared stories that overlapped too neatly. Once, she mentioned a restaurant she'd gone to, describing the view, the music. Later that week, Daniel casually mentioned a work dinner at the same place, same night. The puzzle pieces began to align themselves, slowly, painfully. It's strange how betrayal moves. It doesn't run. It crawls, inch by inch, until it's wrapped around everything you love. I started journaling, writing down every odd thing that happened. At first, it was just to clear my head. But as the pages filled, I realized I was collecting evidence without meaning to. Proof of patterns, proof of change, proof that something precious was quietly rotting beneath the surface. Still, I kept my face calm. I laughed with them. I played the part of the oblivious friend, the trusting partner. And the more normal I acted, the more careless they became. Then came the day that should have been one of my happiest. Daniel's birthday. I'd spent weeks planning a surprise dinner, decorations, music, the works. I even asked Maya to help, thinking it would bring us closer again. She agreed too quickly. She even offered to distract him so I could set everything up. I didn't realize she meant it literally. That night, as I arranged candles around the table, I called Daniel to tell him to come home. No answer. I called Maya, voicemail. An hour passed. Then 2. I sat there, staring at the food growing cold, the candles melting down, the silence stretching thin. At 11 p.m., Daniel finally walked in, hair messy, shirt half tucked, guilt written across his face. He mumbled something about car trouble. I wanted to believe him, but the scent of Maya's perfume clung to his jacket like truth refusing to hide. That was the moment the illusion broke. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just looked at him and smiled. A quiet, knowing smile that said, "I see you now." And in that stillness, I made a silent promise to myself. You may think I'm broken, but this is where I begin. Because every story of revenge doesn't start with anger. It starts with clarity. The calm realization that you've been living in a lie. In the days that followed, I replayed every memory. The laughter. The secrets. The comfort. And I realized that my entire perfect life was just a beautifully decorated cage. But cages can be opened, and soon I would find the key. Sometimes the happiest moments are just the setup for the hardest lessons. And sometimes the people who lift you the highest are only helping you fall farther. The conflict. Whispers behind closed doors. Every secret eventually makes noise. You just have to stay quiet long enough to hear it. After Daniel's birthday, something inside me switched off. Not my heart, it still beat, but the part that trusted, the part that forgave too quickly, went silent. From then on, I stopped reacting and started listening. The first whispers reached me through the walls of the office. A colleague paused mid-sentence when I entered the room. Another gave me that sympathetic half-smile, the kind that says, "I know something you don't." I walked past them, pretending not to notice. But every step down that hallway sounded heavier, like I was walking toward a truth I wasn't ready for. At lunch, I sat in my usual spot, scrolling through my phone, when I caught a glimpse of Maya and Daniel outside the building. They weren't touching, not really, but closeness doesn't always need contact. There was a rhythm to their silence, familiar, intimate. They spoke in quick, low tones. Then they laughed, that laugh again, the same one I'd tried to ignore weeks ago. I looked down at my coffee, my hands steady. Inside, though, something sharp was unfolding, like paper burning slowly from the center. That evening, I opened my laptop and pulled up the journal I'd been keeping. Dates, times, patterns. At first, it had been therapy. Now it was evidence. I read through my own words, each line more damning than the last. I didn't need a confession anymore. I had a timeline. And with it came a question that kept circling in my head. How do you punish someone who doesn't even believe they've done wrong? I didn't want revenge yet. I wanted understanding. So I watched them closer. Days blurred into each other. Maya started showing up to work in new clothes, new perfume, the kind I used to wear. Daniel grew oddly defensive whenever I mentioned her name. It was like watching a story play out that everyone else already knew the ending to. Then one afternoon, as I was leaving, I overheard two co-workers whispering by the elevator. My name, Maya's, a giggle. A sentence that froze me mid-step. She still doesn't know. The doors closed before I could ask what they meant. But I didn't need to. Every piece was already there. I just hadn't put them together yet. That night, I went home early, heart thudding in my chest. Daniel's phone buzzed again, this time while he was in the kitchen. I glanced at the screen. The contact name was saved under something harmless. Alex, the same alias Maya used for client calls. The message was short, tomorrow. Same place. No heart this time. Just a dot. Simple, cold, confident. I took a deep breath, slid the phone back exactly where it was, and smiled when he walked in. Long day? I asked. Yeah, he said, avoiding my eyes. Just work stuff. Always work. The next day I followed my instincts, not my emotions. When Daniel said he had a late meeting, I nodded, kissed his cheek, and waited until he left. Then I grabbed my coat and followed from a distance. The city was crowded, loud, perfect for hiding. I watched him weave through traffic, then turn into a side street lined with cafes. My heart pounded, but my steps stayed calm. From across the road, through the glass window, I saw him. And there she was. Maya. They sat together, heads close, hands touching briefly over the table. He looked at her the way he used to look at me. And for the first time, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt clarity. So it's true, I whispered. They really think I'm blind. I took out my phone, not to expose them yet, but to remember this moment. Because someday soon it would matter. I didn't confront them that night. Confrontations end things too quickly. And I wasn't ready for endings. I wanted transformation, so I smiled through the next few days. I cooked dinner. I laughed at Daniel's stories. I even gave Maya a gift for her promotion. Every word, every gesture, perfectly rehearsed. If they were acting, I could act better. Behind the mask, though, I was building something, a quiet, careful plan. One that didn't rely on anger, but on timing. People think revenge is loud. But the most powerful kind is silent. It waits until silence becomes unbearable. Weeks later, opportunity knocked in the form of a company event. Our firm was hosting a charity gala, inviting everyone, including partners and families. Maya, of course, was in charge of publicity. Daniel had promised to come as my +1. The irony wasn't lost on me. That night, as we got ready, I looked at Daniel through the mirror. You nervous? I asked. Not at all, he said, smiling. You'll be the star tonight. I smiled back, hiding the storm brewing underneath. At the gala, the room shimmered with lights and music. People laughed, danced, toasted success. And there near the back, Maya appeared in a dress I had once worn to another event. Even her hair was styled the same way. I almost laughed. It was no longer about love. It was about imitation. You can't steal someone's light, I thought, when they've already learned how to shine in the dark. The night moved fast. Daniel excused himself several times. Maya, too. I followed once, just enough to see them slip into a quiet hallway, voices low. They didn't notice me watching. For a moment, anger flared, but I let it fade. Because now I knew when and how to strike. Their carelessness had given me the key. Later that week, I started piecing together everything I'd gathered. Messages, photos, small inconsistencies, company files that proved Maya had sabotaged me before. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. Each night I rehearsed what was coming. Not a confrontation, but a revelation. A way to expose truth without raising my voice. To let their actions speak louder than my pain. Because real power isn't in shouting, "I told you so." It's in making the truth undeniable. Betrayal teaches you patience. Revenge teaches you precision. And as I stood before the mirror one last time, I whispered, "They think I'm weak. Let's remind them who I am." The betrayal. The day my world collapsed. Every lie has an expiration date. Mine arrived on a Friday evening, without warning, without mercy. The office was closing early for the weekend. People were laughing, shutting laptops, grabbing their bags. I was packing my things when my manager stopped by. "Could you review the press kit before Monday?" she asked. It was Maya's project, the same campaign she'd begged me to co-sign. I nodded, slid the folder into my bag, and walked out. Nothing felt unusual. But sometimes betrayal hides inside ordinary envelopes. At home, I made tea, sat by the window, and opened the file. Halfway through the documents, I froze. There it was, my signature on a report I hadn't written. The numbers were wrong, the content manipulated. And at the bottom of the email thread, from Maya to Daniel, "It's done. She'll take the fall if anyone checks." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled, tea cooling untouched beside me. They hadn't just betrayed me personally, they'd set me up professionally. "So this was the plan," I whispered. "To erase me, quietly." I scrolled further. There were attachments, screenshots, forwarded messages. Everything painted me as careless, dishonest. If this reached our manager, my career would shatter overnight. I wanted to call Maya, demand an explanation. I wanted to confront Daniel and ask why. But I didn't. Instead, I saved every file, printed each one, and placed them in a folder labeled Truth. Because screaming gives satisfaction to the guilty. Silence gives power to the betrayed. Hours passed. Rain began tapping against the window, steady, relentless. I sat there listening to it, letting the realization sink in. Every memory replayed itself in reverse. The laughter, the secrets, the late-night talks. Now each scene had a new meaning. "She'll take the fall." That line kept echoing until it stopped sounding like a threat and started sounding like a challenge. The next morning, I walked into the office as if nothing had happened. Maya greeted me with her usual bright smile. Daniel texted, "Lunch later?" I replied, "Of course. Let them think I was blind a little longer." I had a new plan forming, one that required patience and perfect timing, but destiny rarely waits. At noon, our manager called an emergency meeting. The campaign report had serious inconsistencies. All eyes turned toward me. Maya sat across the table, calm as ever, a faint sadness painted on her face. Fake sympathy. "I'm sure it's just a mix-up," she said sweetly. "Maybe she uploaded the wrong file." Daniel looked away. "Cowardice looks a lot like guilt when you know what to watch for." I felt the sting of humiliation crawl up my neck, but I kept my voice steady. "I'll fix it," I said. "Give me till Monday." The meeting ended. Whispers followed me out of the room, low, heavy, poisonous. That night, I sat at my desk surrounded by proof, the forged files, the messages, the lies. I wasn't crying anymore. I was focused, because this wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was strategy. I spent the next 2 days gathering everything, every project Maya had touched, every inconsistency she'd created. I cross-checked signatures, timestamps, revisions. Each discovery fit like a puzzle piece sliding into place. By Sunday evening, I had a full picture. They'd been feeding false data into my reports for months, slowly sabotaging my reputation. Daniel had shared confidential info from my laptop, helping her climb while I took the blame. Betrayal doesn't just happen once. It grows in layers, each one sharper than the last. I closed my notebook and looked in the mirror. The reflection staring back wasn't the same woman who'd once begged for honesty. She was calm, measured, ready. Tomorrow, they would see what weakness truly looked like when it learned how to fight. Monday morning arrived crisp and silent. I walked into the building early, folder in hand. Inside was everything: emails, time logs, screenshots, and a short summary written in polite, professional language. No drama, no emotion, just truth. When the team gathered, I stood before them. "I've reviewed the discrepancies," I began. "It seems the wrong files were uploaded under my name. Here's the original work and supporting data." Then I slid the folder across the table to my manager. Maya's smile flickered. Daniel's pen slipped from his fingers. I didn't look at either of them. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. After the meeting, Maya followed me into the hallway. "Why are you doing this?" she hissed. I turned calm. "Doing what? Telling the truth? You could have talked to me first." "I tried," I said softly. "You just kept lying louder." Her face paled. She opened her mouth to speak, but Daniel appeared behind her. For a moment, all three of us stood there, the triangle finally broken. "We never meant to hurt you," Daniel muttered. "Then why did you?" I asked. No answer. Just silence thick enough to end a chapter. That night, the company suspended the project for review. Maya's reputation cracked. Daniel's involvement surfaced when IT traced shared files back to his account. By Tuesday, both of them were being questioned. By Friday, they were gone. But the strange thing about revenge is that it never feels like victory. Not immediately. You think you'll feel triumph, but what comes first is quiet. I sat alone in my apartment, lights off, watching the city through the window. The world outside kept moving, cars, people, laughter. And I realized they didn't destroy me. They just forced me to rebuild. The truth was out. Justice, in its quiet form, had been served. But something still lingered, the question of why. Why had two people who claimed to love me choose deceit over honesty? Maybe some people mistake kindness for weakness. Maybe betrayal is simply how they define power. Whatever the reason, I finally understood one thing. Strength isn't in holding on. It's in letting go and letting the truth do the rest. Sometimes your world has to collapse before you see who's still standing in the ruins with you. The revenge plan. Turning the tables silently. They thought it was over. That once the truth came out, I'd fade into the background, quietly grateful for surviving the storm. But they forgot something important. Storms don't disappear. They evolve. Days passed since Maya and Daniel's suspension. The office had changed. Whispers now carried my name with respect instead of suspicion. Some looked at me differently, as if realizing they'd misjudged who I really was. But I wasn't done yet. Clearing my name wasn't revenge. It was survival. Revenge would come next, slow, silent, and poetic. One morning, as I reviewed a new project, my manager approached. "You've handled yourself with incredible composure," she said. "We'd like you to lead the next campaign. Fresh start. Full control." That was my moment. Not to brag, not to gloat, but to begin rewriting my story from the top. I accepted, smiled, and said the only words that mattered. "Thank you. I won't let you down." But inside, a quieter voice whispered, "This time, I'll let them watch me rise." The seeds of revenge Maya and Daniel weren't completely gone yet. Their cases were under review. HR needed time to finalize findings. In that gray zone, I saw opportunity. I didn't want to ruin them financially or destroy their lives. That wasn't my style. I wanted them to feel what they made me feel: the weight of isolation, the sting of humiliation, the fear of being invisible. So I began subtly. I reached out to colleagues who once avoided me. I helped them with reports, joined their meetings, offered insights Maya used to steal credit for. Soon my circle expanded. People started coming to me for guidance, the same people who once whispered behind my back. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just living so well that those who tried to bury you have to watch you bloom. A few weeks later, a senior director from headquarters visited the branch. He wanted someone to present the new campaign strategy. My manager nominated me. I spent nights preparing, rehearsing, crafting a flawless pitch. Every slide, every word carried precision, not just professionalism but intent. Because I knew who would be sitting. Quietly in the back of the room that day, Maya, she had returned temporarily to assist with transition files. It wasn't lost on me. The universe had offered me the perfect stage, the presentation when the day arrived. I walked into the boardroom dressed in confidence, not armor. Every eye followed me as I connected my laptop and began. The campaign was bold, data-driven yet emotional, creative yet practical. Every success metric I cited reflected the very skills they once dismissed. I could feel Maya's eyes on me the entire time. A mix of envy, regret, and disbelief. "You've done remarkable work," the director said when I finished. "Your vision is refreshing. We could use minds like yours at corporate level." A ripple of applause filled the room. For the first time, I didn't shrink from it. I met Maya's gaze and smiled, not in cruelty, but in closure. That moment wasn't revenge. It was justice wrapped in grace. The ripple effect after the meeting, my inbox overflowed with congratulations. A week later, the director called me personally. "We'd like to promote you to regional project lead," he said. "You'll oversee multiple branches, including your current one, including hers." When I stepped into that role, Maya's final suspension turned into termination. Daniel, too, quietly resigned after being blacklisted for breaching confidentiality. They had tried to climb by stepping on me, but every step they took had weakened their own ground. Yet even then, I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. You'd think watching your betrayers fall would bring peace. But instead, I felt something different, a deep, strange calm. I realized revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about reclaiming your narrative, taking back the power you handed away in trust. The quiet confrontation. A few months later, I received an unexpected email. It was from Maya. Short, hesitant, almost trembling in tone. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You didn't deserve what happened. I lost myself trying to get ahead. I hope you're doing well." I read it 3 times before replying, not out of anger, but out of clarity. "I forgave you a long time ago. I just stopped waiting for you to be sorry." And that was it. No long explanations. No emotional back and forth. Just closure, simple, powerful, and final. Rebirth months passed. Under my leadership, the company hit record growth. My name began appearing in trade magazines, interviews, conferences. Every success wasn't just a career milestone. It was a message written in silence. "You tried to break me, but you built me instead." Still, sometimes at night I'd remember those earlier days, the laughter, the shared lunches, the false sense of belonging. And it hurt a little, because betrayal doesn't erase memories, it just rewrites them. But every time that ache returned, I'd remind myself, you can't control how people betray you. You can only control how you rise from it. The lesson in revenge, true revenge, isn't cruelty. It's clarity. It's walking away from destruction, not diving into it. It's success that speaks louder than their lies ever could. Because when people see you thrive after they tried to break you, that's the kind of revenge that echoes. Not for a day, not for a month, but for a lifetime. And that was my story. Not of pain anymore, but of power. They thought I was weak, but I was just waiting for the right moment to rise. The climax. When the truth went public. Success can be silent for months, until the day it decides to speak for you, loudly, unmistakably, and in front of everyone who ever doubted you. Months had passed since Maya and Daniel disappeared from my daily life. Their names became whispers fading into the background, replaced by new projects, new people, new beginnings. But fate, as always, had one more twist to offer. It happened on the day of the annual industry summit, the biggest professional event of the year. Every company in our field attended. Executives, journalists, and influencers, all gathered under one roof. I had been invited as a keynote speaker. It was my first time standing on such a massive stage, lights blazing, cameras rolling, hundreds of faces staring back. As I stood behind the curtain waiting for my cue, my heart pounded, not from fear, but from realization. This was the moment they'd never believed I'd reach. When I stepped onto the stage, applause echoed like thunder. But halfway through my speech, as I scanned the audience, I froze for half a second. There, in the second row, sat Maya. She looked different, smaller somehow. Her confident posture gone, her expression unreadable, and beside her, Daniel. Apparently, both had joined a minor agency trying to rebuild their careers. They weren't there as guests of honor. They were there as spectators. How poetic, I thought. The ones who once tried to silence me are now listening to my voice echo through an auditorium. The speech I took a breath and began, steady and calm. There was a time when I believed trust was enough. That loyalty guaranteed safety. But life has a way of teaching you that not every smile is sincere, and not every hand extended toward you means to lift you up. The audience grew silent. They didn't know the full story, only fragments from industry gossip, but they could feel the weight in my voice. Sometimes, I continued, you have to lose everything to understand your own strength. And when you rebuild yourself piece by piece, the people who tried to bury you will have no choice but to watch you grow. Applause rose, slow, powerful, unstoppable. I didn't need to look at Maya or Daniel again. Their silence said enough. That day, I didn't expose them by name. I didn't humiliate them. I simply told the truth, framed in grace, layered in strength. Because the best revenge isn't about shouting your pain. It's about letting your triumph tell the story for you. After the stage, when the speech ended, people surrounded me, shaking my hand, asking for interviews, offering collaborations. Some said my words inspired them. Others said they felt seen, that they too had faced betrayal and rebuilt from ashes. And amidst the crowd, I saw Maya again. She didn't come closer. She just stood near the exit watching. For the first time, there was no bitterness in her eyes, only quiet acknowledgement. Then she nodded slightly, as if to say, "You won." But I didn't feel like I'd won anything. Because in truth, it wasn't a competition anymore. It was closure. Clean, quiet, and complete. The revelation later that evening, as news outlets covered the summit, clips of my speech went viral online. People began sharing quotes, tagging the company, celebrating my story of perseverance. The comments poured in, hundreds then thousands. Most didn't even know the full backstory, yet they connected with the message of resilience. Ironically, a journalist reached out a week later asking if I'd share the real experience that inspired the talk. At first, I hesitated. Then I realized this was my chance, not to shame anyone, but to shine light on the truth. So I told it, every part of it, in an article titled, "They Thought I Was Weak, but I Was Just Waiting to Rise." The piece spread like wildfire, not because it was scandalous, but because it was real. Readers resonated with the pain, the patience, and the strength it took to rebuild. And when people searched for Maya and Daniel's names, they didn't find mine beside theirs anymore. They found my article, my speech, my success. Their betrayal had become the prologue to my transformation story. Private justice a month later, I received another message from Maya. This time it was longer. She admitted everything, The manipulation, the jealousy, the desperate need to be seen. She said she lost everything she'd gained through lies, and that seeing me on that stage made her realize what integrity actually looked like. I didn't reply. Not out of hatred, but because forgiveness doesn't always require words. Sometimes silence is forgiveness, wrapped in boundaries and peace. Daniel, on the other hand, sent a simple note. "You were always better than us." I just didn't want to see it. Maybe that was his apology. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, I let the past rest there. The turning point as the months rolled by, my life transformed. My work earned international attention. I began mentoring young professionals, especially those who'd faced workplace betrayal or injustice. It became more than a career. It became a mission. Because once you've been broken and rebuilt yourself, you see others differently. You start spotting pain behind smiles, insecurity behind arrogance, and instead of revenge, you begin to feel something else: compassion. The kind that doesn't forget, but forgives. The kind that doesn't seek to punish, but to protect. The final reflection: standing one evening on the same rooftop where I once cried alone, I looked out at the city lights. The same skyline, but a different heart watching it now. They thought I was weak, I whispered to myself. But weakness was just strength waiting to wake up. Because revenge had never been about them. It was about me. Finding my worth again, my voice again, my peace again. And in that moment, I finally understood. True revenge isn't destruction. It's redemption, what strength really means. People think revenge is about winning, proving someone wrong. But when the dust settles, you realize it's not about victory at all. It's about freedom. Months turned into a year. The chaos had faded into memory, like a storm that had finally passed, leaving behind a quiet, sunlit morning. My life looked different now. New city, new home, new peace. Every morning, I'd wake up, make coffee, and sit by the same window where I once cried over betrayal. But now, those tears had turned into fuel, the kind that built something stronger than revenge ever could. The letter one morning, a letter arrived at my new office. No sender's name, just a plain envelope with my initials written neatly. Inside, a short note. "I saw your article in a mentorship journal. I'm proud of who you became. I'm sorry for who I was." Maya, I read it once, smiled faintly, and folded it back into the envelope. There was no bitterness left in me, no need to respond. Because sometimes, forgiveness isn't about giving someone a second chance. It's about giving yourself permission to stop looking back. I placed the letter in my drawer, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far I'd come. A different kind of power that week. I gave another talk, this time to a group of young professionals just starting their careers. They wanted advice on ambition, growth, and dealing with workplace politics. I began with a simple story. There was a time when I thought being strong meant fighting back. But strength isn't about how loud you fight. It's about how quietly you rise. They listened, eyes wide, hanging onto every word. I told them about trust, betrayal, resilience, not naming names, not reliving wounds, just sharing the wisdom scars had taught me. "Don't let betrayal make you cruel," I said softly. "Let it make you wise." When I finished, the room fell silent. And in that silence, I heard something powerful. Not applause, not admiration, but understanding. The mirror moment. That night, I returned home and stood before the mirror. The reflection staring back wasn't angry anymore. She was calm, certain, free. "You did it," I whispered. "Not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right." I thought about the woman I'd been, the one who stayed late to help others, who trusted too easily, who mistook kindness for weakness. And I smiled, because she wasn't weak. Life after revenge with time, the word revenge lost its sharpness. It became something else, a symbol of transformation. My success wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a bridge toward peace, purpose, and perspective. I started a mentorship foundation for women in corporate industries, helping those who'd faced betrayal, workplace politics, or career sabotage. We shared stories, healed wounds, and turned pain into power. Each story reminded me that betrayal isn't the end. It's just the beginning of the version of you that no one sees coming. The moral never mistakes silence for weakness. The quiet ones often carry storms inside them. And when they rise differently, with purpose, not pride. People will betray you, underestimate you, even try to erase you. But if you stay patient, focused, and kind, their actions become the soil where your strength grows. Revenge, I learned, doesn't always mean payback. Sometimes it's simply peace, the kind that comes from knowing the truth stood tall even when everything else fell apart. They thought I was weak. But I wasn't weak, I was patient. And patience is the kind of power that always wins in the end.
A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail, no return address. But the handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel's didn't shake as I opened it this time. Mia. I don't expect you to respond. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You were right, I lived a lie for so long, I started believing it myself. I lost everything because I didn't value the one thing that mattered. I hope someday you find happiness, even if it's far away from me. Daniele folded the letter quietly and placed it in my drawer, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. He wanted forgiveness, but I had already given it not to him, but to myself. Weeks later, I found myself back at the same beach, sunset painting the sky in gold. I closed my eyes and listened. The waves, the wind, the faint laughter of people in the distance. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for something. Not for love, not for closure, not for anyone to see my worth, because I already did. The sea whispered softly, carrying away everything I had once held on to, the anger, the hurt, the betrayal. And in that quiet, I finally understood. He broke my trust, but I rebuilt my life. He lied, but I found truth. He walked away from love, but I walked into freedom. That night, I wrote one last entry in my journal, a message to anyone who would ever find themselves standing where I once stood. One day, you'll realize the pain that tried to destroy you was actually clearing space for the person you were meant to become. Don't waste your revenge proving them wrong. Spend it proving yourself right. Then I closed the journal, smiled, and whispered to the wind. I found his secret, but in the end, I found something better myself. Moral impact. The lesson behind the silence. People often ask me, if I could go back, would I do things differently? Would I confront him sooner? Leave before the lies grew? Or maybe, never open that laptop at all? And every time, I give the same answer, no. Because every heartbreak, every sleepless night, every silent tear carved me into the woman I am now. The woman who no longer settles for half-truths or half-love. Sometimes the universe doesn't whisper. Sometimes it shatters your world so you finally listen. When betrayal happens, most people think it's about the person who lied, but really, it's about you. It's about how you rebuild after trust collapses, how you face the mirror and learn to love what's still standing, how you decide that pain will no longer define your worth. For a long time, I believed I needed closure from Daniel, that one final apology, that perfect explanation that would make sense of everything. But closure doesn't come from the person who hurt you. It comes from the moment you stop waiting for them to fix what they broke. Forgiveness isn't saying, it's okay. It's saying, it happened, and I'm still here. That's power. When people hear my story, they call it revenge. But I don't see it that way anymore. Revenge is fueled by anger. Healing is powered by truth. I didn't expose him to destroy him. I exposed him to free myself. To end the performance I was trapped in. To step out of the shadows of someone else's lies and stand in my own light again. Because silence protects the liar, not the truth. And for too long, I had been silent. That night at the gala wasn't just the night he was unmasked. It was the night I remembered who I was before the manipulation, before the doubts, before I was made to question my instincts. It was the night I took my name back. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You can't always control betrayal, but you can control what it builds in you. Pain can harden you, or it can shape you. It can close your heart, or it can make it stronger, wiser. Impossible to fool again. I chose the second. Because healing isn't loud. It's not dramatic or sudden. It's quiet, steady, and often invisible. It's making your own coffee in the morning without feeling the ache of absence. It's laughing at something simple and realizing it didn't feel forced. It's waking up one day and realizing you haven't thought of them at all. That's real revenge. Peace after chaos, and if you're listening to this, maybe you've been there too. Maybe you're in that stage of doubt, or heartbreak, or trying to understand how someone you trusted could lie so isolated. If you are, I want you to know this. You will survive it. You will outgrow it. And one day, you'll thank the pain for teaching you boundaries no one can ever cross again. The truth doesn't destroy people, it reveals them. And what you do with that truth decides who you become. Today, I don't hate Daniel. I don't even think about him with anger. Because he gave me something he never intended to. A rebirth. He showed me how fragile a life built on lies can be, and how strong a woman becomes when she finally tells the truth. He lost everything. I found myself. And maybe, that's the most poetic justice of all. Every ending hides a beginning. Mine started the night I opened his laptop. The night I thought my world had fallen apart, but really, it was being rearranged. If you ever find yourself standing where I once stood holding the truth in your hands, terrified of what it might destroy, remember this: truth doesn't destroy what's real. It only clears what was never meant to last. Let it burn the lies, the doubts, the apologies that come too late. Let it strip you down to who you really are. Because once you've faced the truth, nothing and no one can ever break you the same way again. I found his secret. And yes, it broke me for a while. But in the silence that followed, in the ashes of everything I thought I'd lost, I built something far greater, not revenge, not justice. Peace. And that was the ending he never saw coming.